So, big warm welcome to this morning's Lockdown Live. My name is Jo McMeekan. I am a highly specialist children's physio working in the Bristol and South West area and covering online services for parents and families across the UK and beyond. Thank you for joining me this morning. It's exciting to have a few of you here. I can see a few of you are watching, so do just let me know that you're here. Give me a little thumbs up or a heart or something, and just say hi. So I'm going to spend this morning talking to you about a couple of bits and pieces, as I say. First thing that I wanted to do was a little bit of running through a few definitions of some things that crop up and questions that I get asked quite commonly. One of these things is around muscle tone, around the differences between high and low muscle tone and how we kind of describe muscle tone. But I also wanted to talk a little bit about sensory needs. So for those of you who are new to the page or new to the group, I am also an SEN parent myself. So my son has sensory processing disorder. My youngest son, Arthur, he started school in September. So the road that I've kind of trodden with him since having his diagnosis has been a little bit different to the road that I've trodden just as a parent, just as a professional rather. And it's been really interesting experiencing things on both sides of the coin, particularly for an area where the resources are potentially quite limited for families accessing provision and support with things like sensory needs as well. So I'm going to talk to you a little bit about sensory needs and sensory processing and how and why they've become a big part of my practice also. But we'll start off with muscle tone. So I get asked quite a few questions around managing muscle tone and the differences between high and low muscle tone, whether we should stretch children who have low muscle tone, those sorts of things as well. It'd be really interesting to know whether or not, if you're watching this morning, whether your child's got high muscle tone, low muscle tone, a mix of presentations. And it will help me just to answer any questions or queries or to kind of direct some information a bit more specifically for you. But high muscle tone. So I talk about muscle tone. Muscle tone is the readiness of our body or our muscles for action and activity. So when we are resting, when we have a very typical presentation of muscle tone, when we are resting, our volume button sits at that kind of mid-level or quite a low level. And I like to think about muscle tone as being with a volume button because I think it really helps us to kind of work out in our minds exactly what it means and how we apply it. So when we're resting, that volume button is down low. There's not much sound coming out of those speakers. We're not all that ready to kind of get up and dance and be active. When we are needing to get up and move, our brain sends messages to our muscles, and that volume button slowly and in a quite a regulated way kind of comes up and is switched on to the right level to send the right amount of power through to our muscles. In children who have low muscle tone, the threshold for turning that volume button up is different. Often it's lower, but the threshold is higher, so they need more input before that volume button comes up. But for children with high tone, with spasticity or dystonia or a mixed tone presentation, for example, the control of the volume button coming up can be a little bit wiggly. So you might get some fluctuations in that muscle tone, but it can also be stuck up at the high volume button as well, so that we're constantly asking for those muscles to be active and they're working in that shorter position as well. So I like this analogy because it also helps us to think about it around our muscle flexibility and what we need to do about it. So we know for our children who are low tone that we need to give a little bit of extra input, kind of bit of prod, bit of power into those systems to be able to turn that volume button up a little bit and to allow for children to have a greater awareness about what's needed from their body and to be sending that power into those muscle groups ready for action and ready for strengthening. For children with high muscle tone, where the volume button is naturally stuck up a little higher and asking for more activity than we need, because the muscles are working in a shortened position all of the time, or for a lot of the time, it becomes very difficult for them to sort of stretch and move through range. And again, for them to have that nice fluid control of the muscles, so that volume button gets turned up a little bit, down a little bit. It kind of fluctuates in all of our activities that we do as we send power to our muscles and then ask for it to switch off for a period of time. So it's important to remember that the control and the coordination is going to be affected, but also the muscle length, because those muscle fibers are in a shortened position. And so it's really important that we're using activities that encourage relaxation, things like massage, stretching, and some sensory input as well. I've talked about this a lot in the muscle flexibility course that has just run with my online membership, the Therapy Toolkit Hub. So we've covered this in loads of detail as part of that, and talked about the value of things like stretching and massage and gone through massage techniques and things. But on a very basic level, just knowing and understanding that there is that volume button that kind of exists for our muscles, and then we either need to be turning it up or turning it down to be getting the most from our strengthening exercises and activities, is often really good to know, because it will help you to deliver your physio at home. And in knowing that, and in kind of assessing where your child's at with their tone each day, you know, is it particularly low? Are they a bit low and floppy in their tone today? Or is it particularly that they're stiff and that you're having trouble stretching them? If that's the case, then you may find that using those tools in your toolkit for a bit of sensory integration, so adding in some activities that are going to wake their muscles up a little bit, or using something like some massage and stretching to release and relax and let everything just drop that volume button down a bit, can then mean that when you strengthen or when you go to do some physio-based activities during the day, that the muscles are in a better position to actually have carryover. And carryover simply means that when we do something for physio, that it has an effect later on as well, not just in that moment, which is obviously what we're aiming for when we're delivering physio. So that's a little bit about muscle tone. If anyone's got any questions about muscle tone, do pop them in the comments below, and I will check them towards the end. If there's anything else that crops up, any questions around managing muscle tone, around accessing, say, support with neurology or orthopedics, or when that might be needed for your child's presentation, then I will do my best to try and answer some of those questions as well. So I touched a little bit on the toolkit side of things. This is something that I talked about in my free challenge that I ran in November, and that we draw on all of the time in the membership program, the Therapy Toolkit Hub. So we talk about adding little nuggets of knowledge, basically, and creating this big toolkit, so that you can pick out, as parents, you can be empowered enough to pick out what you need and when you need it. And that isn't just about your physical resources for physio, your equipment and your exercises, and all of that sort of thing, but it's also about the professionals that you're involved with, and it's about your emotional resources. It's about your connections with other parents as well, who know and understand the situation that you're in. And I think all of those tools in your toolkit add up to allowing you as a parent to feel informed and empowered. And I know from my own journey with Arthur, with my son, that actually the more I knew and understood about his needs, and the more I kind of understood a bit of the science underneath it, you know, where was it coming from? Oh, actually, it's coming from the brain and the pathways in the brain, and understanding all of those aspects, the more I could understand how he was presenting on a day-to-day basis. And by understanding that, I've been able to pull little bits of resources out of my toolkit on a day-to-day basis. But I've also known from that when I need to carry stuff over and maybe discuss something more with school, or realise that there's something that's going on kind of behind the scenes that's triggering some things for him, that we're seeing at home, but perhaps school aren't picking up on. Or need a little bit more help and support to know and understand. And because I've got the knowledge and I've got the information as a parent, it's easy for me to then impart that but also pick out the bits that school need to know rather than it feeling kind of big and overwhelming for them. So having this concept of creating a toolkit for yourself and your family, I think is a really useful way of working out how to draw on the bits of information and knowledge that you need. So as I say, just recapping over that toolkit, your toolkit's made up of your equipment and resources, toys, postural management equipment, maybe specialist seating if you've got it, or standing frames. But it's also made up of your professional resource base as well. So your physios, your OTs, your speech and language therapists. We include school in that, any of your consultants or hospitals or medical professionals who might be involved with your child's care. And for some people, that might be the bit that is lacking. You may feel that you are lacking some access to the right professionals, or perhaps that your time and your resources are limited with access to those professionals as well at times, depending on what your individual circumstances and setup are. But if that's the case, knowing that that's where your resources are depleted means that you can go and target your energies, because they're not finite for us as parents, they're not never ending. We only have a limited amount of them, and when we're having a challenging time with our kids as well, they're even more limited, let alone when we throw homeschooling into the mix, because they then become even more limited again, don't they? But knowing that we can make the most of those our energy and our resources to be able to find out exactly what we need and to target and direct that, I think is a really useful tool for us as parents. And it really helps as a professional as well. When I have parents come to me and say, I really want to work on this, or I've noticed that this is a challenge, I've noticed that this is cropping up. I'm not really sure what I need to do about it, or I'm not really sure why it's happening, but I've noticed it. And I think I need you to help me to do something about it. It really helps to guide me as a professional to know exactly what it is that you need from me and where you want to focus your energies and where to focus the time that we have together. So again, being empowered as a parent, it empowers you as a parent, having this knowledge, having this understanding about what it is that you need, even if you don't know why you necessarily need it. If you know that there's a gap that needs filling, it helps you to direct your energy and your resources to fill it. And it also helps you to make the most of your professional resources to fill it as well. So it's a little bit about the toolkit that I talk about, and that can really help with things like goal setting as well. So getting really specific with what you need to do and how you need to do it. And we cover all of this on a termly basis in the membership program as well. So try and get together once a term on Zoom with the parents who are in the membership program so that we can talk about exactly what we want to focus on, or whether there's any kind of needs or bits that crop up, so that it helps to kind of hone your mind in on where your energies and your resources are going. So I promised also to talk a little bit about sensory needs. So as I've said just now, sensory processing is something that's come up both on a personal and a professional level for me in the last couple of years. And I think one of the things that I always find useful to share is that actually there are so many children who, the more we understand what their sensory processing is, so for example, how they interpret the world, what their threshold is for understanding, or what their threshold is for picking up information about sound, sights, smells, feelings, so both internally, emotionally, hunger, needing the loo, things like that. That's your interoception. But also about body awareness and proprioception, which comes up massively for a lot of the kids that I see these days. The more we understand about that, the more that when we meet those needs, we deliver therapy that becomes much more successful. And this is the same for learning and focus and attention. And it's something that is a really, we don't know enough about it in schools or teachers it's not part of their standard training. So it's often something that we have to support the process of, not just about what our child's physical needs are, but what their sensory needs are. And the two of those come hand in hand when it comes to learning. So this might be something that comes up for you guys if you've got a child with sensory needs at home, who you are working with to do some home learning, and you're finding that their focus and their attention, or they're fidgeting, or they're moving, or they're struggling with their postural control, and they're really kind of slumping and finding it difficult to concentrate. But meeting those sensory needs and making sure that they're well supported with their posture, that you have given them a chance to kind of blow off steam beforehand and then bring it down and regulate them a little bit more, can really help with having those snippets of attention too. And that's the same for delivering therapy at home. So whether it's home learning or whether it's sneaking in a little bit of physio here and there, making sure they're regulated so they're able to kind of calm their body systems and focus on the task that is happening, and incorporating that into the therapy that you're delivering, is a really important part of making that successful. So making sure that you are, as I say, giving them a chance to spin, to hang upside down, to be squeezed, perhaps a little bit of deep pressure, and really allowing those activities to be child-led. So if you notice that your kids are having a moment where they're having a mad 5 minutes and they need a little bit of time to blow off that steam, and then bringing it back to something that's a little bit more of a calming activity. So in my house, this is where we get like the therapy putty out after the scooter board has come out, for example, and we've done lots of spinning in circles or hanging upside down or leaping off the sofa. And we follow that up with making use of things like sensory putty, which again is brilliant for fine motor activities. So if you're going to be doing any writing activities, it can be a really nice one to do. Or the slime comes out, or perhaps we do some deep pressure or some massage, which is a really calming activity. And we make use of any weighted items as well, before doing a snippet of focus. And that makes a massive difference to how well, particularly for my son, he will engage in an activity, but it also makes a difference for the other children that I work with. And it's something that, as I've understood more about sensory processing and more about sensory needs, and I've incorporated it more into my practice, I've noticed that the actual elements of strengthening become so much more successful. And even though those are still really kind of disguised with play, it's still a really important part of making that strengthening side of things successful. So if you feel that there's a few bits of behaviours or things that you've noticed that I've mentioned today that have cropped up for your child that you thought maybe this wasn't something that I needed to consider, if you've got any questions, then do let me know, and I'm more than happy to share what knowledge I have, or to pass you on to a colleague of mine who runs a brilliant Facebook page for children with sensory processing challenges. So I'm going to check in on the comments now and answer a few questions, just if there are any. So, and if you are watching this on replay, then do pop them into the comments and I will check them afterwards. We'll just see if anybody has commented. I think we're all quiet today. A few really quiet people. Unless I'm missing comments, which is also a possibility, because you never quite know with Facebook, because it does do some weird and wonderful things. But no, I think we're all quiet on the comments today. So I've given you a few snippets of information, just done a bit of a whistle-stop tour about muscle tone, how it looks, and some of the resources that you might be able to draw on to be able to manage muscle tone, either waking up the muscles and getting them active and engaged, or to turn that volume button up, or bringing that volume button down a little bit with things like massage, stretching and relaxation techniques to drop tone down to mean it's not going to be interfering with our strengthening activities. We've also talked about adding resources into your toolkit, working out where those resources are lacking, be it equipment, professionals, your emotional resources, or your connections and support networks with friends, family, other parents, for example. And we finished off talking about sensory processing as well, and the impact that sensory processing has. And just remembering that if your child, particularly during the first year of life, or the first couple of years of life, has had any kind of increased access to hospital environments, or has been particularly unwell, or perhaps they were born prematurely, when the sensory systems typically develop in utero in quite a quiet, floaty, lovely, calm environment, and they've come out into the world a little earlier than planned, sensory systems will be affected in how they pick up and register information from the environment around us. And knowing that, I think, is a really important part of, as I say, of delivering physio, because knowing that these early childhood experiences and in utero experiences affect how our children process information about their environment actually has a really big impact on how they move, how they learn to move, how they plan their movements. And so is all going to have a big impact on strengthening and on improving and meeting their goals from a functional perspective and accessing physio as well. So putting those things all together to make sure that you're recognising what those needs are is fundamental to providing what your child needs. Thank you very much for joining me this morning. As I say, if there's any questions or things that crop up, if you've got any queries about anything, or if you'd like me to cover anything in particular in any future live sessions, then do please let me know. It's exactly what the parent platform is there for. It is a group for you to share information. You're welcome, if you feel comfortable, to put videos or pictures of any activities that you might need some support with, except for home learning. I'm going to draw the line with home learning because I'm not sure I can support any more with that. But beyond that, I am very happy to chip in and to signpost you, or to give you any information and advice that you might find useful. And if anyone wants any more information about the Therapy Toolkit Hub, we are just in the process of voting on what next term's content's going to be. And I'm going to be releasing a podcast as part of it. So all the tech is going on in the background for that at the moment. But I'm so conscious that as parents, we're often on the go, and that as much as our want and desire to take this information is really high often, and we want to know more, we are often time poor and we are often energy poor as well. So for me, and I know for a lot of parents in the Therapy Toolkit Hub, accessing things like podcasts and audiobooks is a real winner, because you can just pop it onto your phone, or onto the Alexa or whatever, and let it run in the background whilst you're cooking tea or doing something else. So a lot of the information from there will be moving onto the podcast from next term. And I'm really excited about that, because I think that'll be an exciting way to move things forward. But yeah, if you have any questions, as I say, do let me know, and I will speak to you all soon. Take care.